Previously on the deep dive with League Troop.
Yeah, I just was emotional. I started, vomiting blood, when I got out on the freeway at about 36 kilometers. And I don't remember finishing the race. And still to this day, I don't. And I've never, ever watched that Olympic race.
How was your 12 months post the games? Because pretty serious injury too. So go through the next 12 months and your training and how that was going.
Yeah, well, I didn't know that I'd torn my rectus abdominis, so imaging had proved that. I went to Rotterdam in April of 2001, ran 2:10, so I felt like I was back on the cusp. I was going to Chicago, and I was really excited about going to Chicago in 2001, but then I tore my calf. And then I just pretty much spiraled a little bit out of control through 2001. Towards the end of 2001 and started 2002. And, I just started partying and drinking and, just trying to put all my frustrations into things that you didn't have to think about. And, a friend of mine at the time sat me down, a guy called Tim Matthews, and he was like a manager of a nightclub and I was frequenting it, 2 or 3 times a week. And, he just basically pulled me aside and was just saying I was being an idiot. Like, what the hell was I doing? Like, here I am, this elite athlete. And, he works in a nightclub. He works with, people that he doesn't want to work with and sees people he doesn't want to see. And I'm one guy that he doesn't want to see in there. And, I sort of had a few people sort of giving me that stern sort of advice, Andrew Lambert, physical therapist for Hawthorn, and a good friend of mine that I room with, just people in my ear, just like, what the hell are you doing? And I know it sort of took a fair bit of work to try and get myself back, but then that sort of led into Commonwealth Games in 2002 and getting me back. And I finished 7th. It was nothing fantastic, but, it got me then to win Zatopek in 2002 and then set me up for 03 and 04. I went to Lake Biwa in March of 03 and ran my fastest time of 2:09.49. And, I went to the World Championships and I finished 17th and ran 2:11 on a broken toe. And then went to London in 2004 and, finished 6th or 7th and ran 2:09 on a really, really bad day. And then obviously went to Athens Olympics later that year.
Sorry, you brushed over those 2 big races. They were super. So Lake Biwa, the 2 sub 2:10 events, and tell us about, like, you're in ridiculous shape. The 2:09.49, but tell us about the training. Did anything change? Did everything now? You were self-coached at this stage, Truby, and then tell us about 04 London, where Mona's. Did he pace you that day and the weather and?
Yes, I moved back to Geelong after the Olympics in 2000. Again, things can become quite polarizing. So, after the Olympics in Ballarat, it was like, this is Mona's town. It's like, I couldn't see myself being there. It was great to actually, be the apprentice under Mona, but he was always the master. And I was just finding it hard to find my own niche. So, I came back to Geelong and, Mona was mentoring me. I'd see Mona, once every few months and we'd talk about training and racing, but I certainly was devising what training I was going to do. Like, I would come to Ballarat and do hills, but if I wanted to stay in Geelong and do reps around Eastern Park, I would. And, I'd have Mona Fartley, but if I didn't want to do it, I'd do 3-minute reps. And, I'd have track workout. If I didn't want to do Deeks quarters, I would do hill repeats, so I was sort of mixing and matching, but I sort of got caught into this thing, which I'd said to you that, when I had trained with race against Mona, I'd got to a point where it was great training with Mona, but as much as Mona was a mentor, he was also a competitor. He knew what I was doing and he knew what he had to do. He had a coach. And so I sort of always had a guard up with that. And so when I did move to Geelong, it wasn't this flowing thing of, I want you to coach me. I still had this guard up because Mona was still competing. Like Mona said he retired, but he never retired, and so I sort of, and this is just, it's all on me. There was just this trust issue that I couldn't give 100% of myself to Mono because I always felt like Mono kept his cards close to his chest, and I couldn't give myself to that, and so, it was great having him as a mentor, and, and he was there like in some pivotal moments, like when I went to Lake Biwa in 2003, Mono was pacing, and, Mono paced up to 30 kilometers, and, I remember Mono, pulling off to the side of the road, and, Mono screaming out like, "You've got this." And I said to him, I said, "I'm breaking the Australian record today." And I took off, and, I got hit by a truck at 34K, and the wheels fell off, and I ended up running 209. And, I went to London, and then I started changing things, right? So when I ran 209.49, I was still doing the same things, and things were very simplistic: twice a day, running 200 kilometers a week. And then I went to Paris World Championships, and 3 or 4 days before the race, I broke my toe. I stubbed my toe into a suitcase, and, I didn't know that I'd broken my toe. I'd gone in, and my toe had flared up, and they decided that I should go to Paris to get x-rays. And so the team doctor was already there. Andrew Lambert, who I mentioned was my best friend, and he was a physical therapist, and the guy I lived with, he flew over there with me, and they did the x-rays. And when I got called into the room, I just got told, "Oh, look, it's bruising. If we tape it all up, you'll be fine. You'll still be able to race." So that's all I thought it was bruising. I run 2:11, finished 17th. And I found out after the race I had a broken toe. And what I found out afterwards was that the doctor and Andrew Lambert agreed that there was nothing that I could do for a broken toe, and they could treat a broken toe and a bruised toe or a bruised capsule exactly the way. And if I didn't know that it was broken, I wouldn't think that it was broken. And they were 100% right, because the only time it really hurt was when I went up the Champs Elysees and down the Champs Elysees because of the rocky cobblestones. And it hurt, like it was excruciating. But I'm just like, it's just a bruise, harden up, like stop being weak about this, And so it was after I crossed the line when they were just like, "Damn, you are a tough son of a bitch. Like you ran on a broken toe." And I'm like, oh my God, I was furious. But then, like a few days later, you're just like, okay, well, that's pretty cool. But during that time, like I was like, all right, I need to change things around. Like I'm doing all these things, and I'm 209. I know I can run 207. So I started training 3 times a day. I started like doing 150-mile weeks. And no, actually, I'll tell a lie. I was doing the 3 times of training leading into the Sydney Olympics, and that's how I ended up getting that stress fracture. I decided in 2003 and towards the end of 2003, I wasn't going to train 3 times a day, but I was going to change my training around to where I was going to be running 240 kilometers a week. My easy day was going to be Monday, Thursday, and Saturday, where I did 10 miles in the morning or 16K in the morning and 16K at night. I was going to be doing 2.5-hour runs on a Sunday. But the last 30 minutes, I was going to run close to 10K race pace. And so, 3 minutes a kilometer, 30 minutes for 10K. So I started training harder than I ever had, and I went into London that year unbelievably fit. Like I went to Beppu Marathon to pace a half marathon. They wanted me to run 64 minutes, 64:30. And I just did it off heavy training. And it was the easiest thing I'd done in the world. Like I cruised through it. And so when I went to London, I was confident that I could run 207. We had, pacemakers set up, and, we went through halfway in 63:10. I went through 30 kilometers in 90:06. So I'm on 206 pace. Unfortunately, once you went through the Tower Hotel, the last 6 or 7 kilometers you run up along the Thames, and it was into a howling headwind. It was bucketing down with rain, and I just couldn't get gears. I was running with Stefano Baldini, who ended up winning the Olympics that year, and Stefano's a short, nuggety type of guy, and I'm just long and thin, and he opened up, probably 20, 30 meters on me going across where the Tower Bridge was, and once we got up onto that, onto the Thames, I couldn't break it up, and then I was like 50 meters behind, 80 meters behind. And it was like taking 2 steps forward and 8 steps back. And we all ended up tiring. Like I ended up running 2:9:58 and dropping 3 minutes. Stefano dropped 2 minutes and was like 2:8 high. Everyone went backwards. And, I was frustrated. Like I'd run this unbelievable race. I really believed that I could run 2:07 on that day. And so once I got back from London, I decided that I was going to train harder again. I don't know how you can train harder, but I didn't take the recovery that I should have, and I didn't absorb what I should have. And I then trained like a madman, getting ready for Athens. And I was heading up to Ballarat and training in a heat chamber for a couple of weeks. And then, I was coming back home and, basically trying to get ready to head back to altitude. And then I would train in a heat chamber. And, I overcomplicated a very simple process. And by the time I got to Athens, I was flat. I was a car that had 5 gears. And on that day, only 4 were working. And I got my ass handed to me.
Well, yeah, look, it's hard. It would have been hard physically because you knew the shape you were in April of 04. That London race, that was the one. No doubt, 206 was on the cards, and on a normal day, you'd probably break the Australian marathon record. Hey, there's nothing wrong with being short and nuggety, by the way. The Baldini, it must be an Italian trait. Look, Baldini went to win gold. Take us through succinct quickly the Athens Games. Wasn't meant to be, even though the last 24 months you've been in ridiculous shape, the top 4 or 5 marathoners in the world. And take us through that period of that day in Athens and give the listeners a bit of an indication of where you're at. Well, I just get a beer and join you, mate. I reckon you can go for a beer break, or you're right to keep going.
No, I'm good. Look, Athens was unbelievable. Athens, it was the home of the Olympic marathon, so I got to run from Marathonis to the Panathinaikos Stadium against not only the world's best athletes at the time, but people that have run that route since 1896. And so for me, it was like, and obviously going way back to pre-game. So to head out there and to be, for a marathoner, it's the home of the Olympics, and it's the home of the marathon. So it was a very nostalgic moment. We got to stay out at Marathonis. Steve Monaghetti was out there with me, and he actually got up that morning and went and ran the marathon because Mona's an emotional type of person. So just running that route. It was hot. It felt dry. I had a solid run. I got to run 2:17 or 2:18. The pace for me was it was the same. Like, I knew I was in trouble early because there was all these surges taking place, and I couldn't counteract any of the surges. Normally when you're on top of things and you're feeling great, a surge happens and you can counteract it. And I just couldn't counteract any surges. And I just basically ran from start to finish with the same gear. Running into the stadium was unbelievably amazing. I got to see Yanis Kouros and, all these unbelievable people. And, then I went and met family and friends. And, I think I have the best after party story when it comes to Athens. And, it was just, finding everyone, and then we decided I was going to go home and have a shower. So we walked out, and as we were walking out in Athens, there's these little tin sheds that are set up on every street corner. And they basically sell alcohol and soda and cigarettes. And so one of my friends was like, why don't we have a beer? And I really wasn't in any rush. I just run, 42 kilometers, and it was hot. I was pretty knackered. And so we had a beer, and it went down like nails. It was unbelievably painful. And so then they were just like, why don't we have another one? And I'm like, all right, let's have another one. So we had another one. We drunk that shed out of beer. So then we moved up to the next street corner. And so all of a sudden the beers weren't tasting as harsh, and the beers were starting to taste pretty good. And we drank that shed corner out of beer, and then we moved up to the next one. And I'm still in my Olympic uniform. I've still got my singlet, shorts, race number, race shoes on. And granted, we're on my way back to my wife's house to have a shower so we could go out. And then it's like 12:30 at night. People are hungry. So we decided that we, go and get some gyros. And so we're eating them, and we decided to go to a nightclub. And so we go to a nightclub, and there's a picture of me at 3:00 in the morning, still in my shorts, singlet, race shoes on the dance floor with a guy called Wayne Larden, who runs the Sydney Running Festival. By that stage, we were on vodkas. We were off beers. And we somehow made our way home at around about 6 a.m. So got home, went to bed. I woke up the next morning still in my shorts, singlet, and race shoes. And we have a tradition in Australia that the next morning after the marathon, you would go out for a 20-minute run. You would run to the highest point that's possible, and you would look the bald eagle in the eye, and you would make a pact to the bald eagle as to whether you would continue for another Olympic cycle or whether you were done, or, you know, what your plans were for the next year. So there was my wife and a friend, and there was Mona, and we decided that we would run to the top of the Acropolis. So we've had a couple of hours sleep. I'm still in the gear that I'd raced in the night before and partied in the night before. And we ran to the top of the Acropolis, and, I made my peace that I was going to try and make another 4 years to the Beijing Olympics. And I remember standing up there, and this Japanese guy comes up to me and he's like, photo, photo. I didn't know what he was like saying, but he wanted a photo. And what happened was he then showed me his photo, and he scrolled through photos of me finishing in the Panathinaikos Stadium 12 hours earlier, and then wanted a photo with me 12 hours later, smelling like a brewery and still in the same singlet, shorts, and shoes that I'd raced in the night before. So that ended up being a pretty legendary story that was told for many, many years.
I love that we've heard that then on this podcast, because anyone that knows me personally or knows me knows how much I would love that story. Troopy, there's a reason why Aussies love you, because the toughness, determination, and the ability to drink beers till 6 a.m. and vodkas, of course, is one of your many strengths. I love you, great man. That's fantastic. Coming off 04, did you have some time in Europe? Could you have some time out? It was a holiday. Did you have a holiday at all? A few weeks? Could you chill out for a bit?
Yeah, so 04, we what did we do in 04? No, I don't think we holidayed after 04. We came home. I obviously was extremely disappointed with a bad Olympics. And then I had run at that stage 1,000 days without a day off. I think I'd run like 1,000, might have been 1,100 days without a day off. And so I'd come home, and I'd already started mapping out what I was going to do. I was going to do Fukuoka, and, I was going to set myself up in 2006. I was getting, married in 2006. And so I ended up doing my calf about 6 weeks after Athens. And then that sort of led into 2005. I couldn't get healthy to save myself. So I was injured all 2005, sort of went through a bit of a mini spiral like I did after, Rotterdam in 2001, except it was a lot more magnified at that point because I couldn't get to the start line of any race healthy, and I kept breaking down. And I ended up being pointed to a guy called Shane Hamill, who's a soft tissue therapist in Geelong. And I went and saw him, and basically I just needed complete time out, no running, needed to get myself healthy. And we'd started this long process of just no running and complete rehabilitation for about 3-4 months. So that ended up all of 2005. Then 2006, and what I tried to make the Commonwealth Games in 2006. And so I foolishly went to Fukuoka Marathon at the end of 2005, still not healthy, knowing that I was injured. But I just had this stupidity and this thought in the back of my head that I'm Lee Troop and that I'm going to get the qualifying time. And I went there, and I wasn't healthy, and I was pretty much shot 4 kilometers into the race. I still finished it and ran 2:29. It was snowing, and it was unbelievably horrendous. And I remember sitting in the middle of the track in Fukuoka with the snow just pelting down, and just sitting there with my head between my legs, knowing that I wasn't going to be running at the home Commonwealth Games in Melbourne. And, like, what the hell was I going to do? And, luckily, my practitioner was there, and you can certainly sort out a lot of the world's problems over a few beers and a few sakis. And we just decided at that point that I needed to just stop running. I'd run through 2005 just completely battered. I was limping on one leg, and I just wasn't healthy. So that was it. Knowing that I wasn't going to run Commonwealth Games, I decided to stop running. I got married in 2005, and we were expecting in 2006. And so it just allowed me to put time into other areas where I could get healthy. And as I started to feel like I was coming back, I decided that rather than just shoot straight into, running the big major marathons around the world, that I would actually try and do something local. So I had handpicked to run the Gold Coast Marathon, and that was in July. So it was going to give me plenty of time to get healthy. Being an elite athlete, I get paid well to race abroad. There's not a lot of money in Australia, but Gold Coast were going to pay me that year. And so it sort of set me up for me to take some deep breaths, get myself healthy, welcome our baby daughter into the world in February, and then set myself on that. So, went to Gold Coast. I was able to win that and run 2:14 pretty much solo. And then the remainder of that year, I won the Australian Cross Country Championships a few months later, and then I won Zatopek again. So I ended up winning 3 Australian titles in 6 months, and that certainly got me back in with a chance of trying to make my third Olympics in 2008.
That's a good year, 06. Now, 07, the world champs and the like. Now, remiss of me, I'm sorry. 07, did you go to the world champs?
No, I didn't. I went to Paris Marathon in 07 to qualify for the Olympics in 08, and I just had a horrendous race. It was 33 degrees. I'd never run the Paris Marathon before, and I was a little precious. I'd done a lot of the city marathons where, you have your own drinks table and you have your own drink spot and you have your own spotter and, everything is like really good. And I went to Paris Marathon and all the elite men and all the elite women were on one table. And so it was just a free for all. So I went through the first 5K and I couldn't find my drink, and I look up and there's a Moroccan drinking my drink. And so I went up and I punched him in the arm, and I got to the second, I got to 10K. There wasn't a drink there for me. I got to 15K. I knocked it off the table, and I was running 2:06 pace by the time I got to 16K, 17K in 33-degree weather, and the wheels come off, and it was such a shit fest. Like things just went bad, and I hadn't pulled out of a race at that point, and I remember getting to 25 kilometers and I was spent. I had nothing, and I decided I was going to stop. And the French are very motivating. They're very passionate, and they're screaming and yelling at me. And I was all right. This is a sign. I can't stop. I've got to do this. I've got to finish it. So I took off running, and I got to 30K, and I was like, I'm done. I'm walking off, and I was trying to work my way through the crowd, and I knew where 30K was, and I knew where the finish was, and I knew I just had to walk through this little town to get there. But somehow I got lost, and I ended up in this little utopia where everyone was going to church. These people didn't even know the Paris Marathon was on, and I'm trying to ask for directions, and no one knew what I was saying. And I ended up popping out at about the 35-kilometer mark. I was like, shit, I've got to finish the run. So I ended up running in, and then they're trying to put medals on me, and I couldn't take a medal because I'd obviously walked off the course and I cut a few kilometers off. And I walked through to the presentation area. There was no elite athletes. There was no elite athlete coordinator. I couldn't find my friend. So then I walked back outside, and then I got stuck outside. It was just crazy. Anyway, I got back inside, and I ended up finding my friend Shane Hamill, several hours after the race, and we made our way back to the hotel. And I was like, shoot, I'm not making a third Olympics. I'm done. But it was just the whole hysteria of things. I'd certainly not chiseled myself for some hardship. I'd been treated quite well, quite precious through my marathon career. And so that certainly was a kick in the pants. And then I actually went to Berlin in 2007 to qualify for the Olympics, which is where I did. And that itself was just another crazy day. I went out with the second pack, and the second pack was to run 64 minutes, and they went 2:55 pace, 3:10 pace, 2:57, 3:01. And it was so up and down. And I got dropped by that second pack at about 18 kilometers. And I had conceded at that point that I wasn't going to be making a third Olympics, but I figured, I'm there. I need to finish the race off. If I'm not making the Olympics, I may as well see it out as best I can. And anyway, I don't know what happened. I just put my head down and I just kept grinding and grinding and grinding. And then anyway, I remember at about 30 kilometers, someone told me I was ninth. I was like, what? No. Anyway, I ended up running fifth, and I ran 2:10:31, which qualified me for my third Olympics. But it was just one of those ones where, like I said, I'd done the work. I had sort of, unlike Paris, like in Paris, I gave up. But at Berlin, I was like, all right, it seems like I'm not going to make it, but I'm going to make sure that this is the best race I could do to close the chapter on. And yeah, I ended up running 2:10 and qualified for Beijing.
You are one tough bastard. We love you, Troopy. I'll tell you what, so coming into 08, now Beijing, there was a lot of conjecture, for those that don't remember. Lots and lots of, I guess, controversy about the air quality. Clearly the heat was going to be an issue. The marathon is obviously the hardest event, some would argue, in the world. So Beijing Olympics come around. Now, Gabriel Salesi, who's the best in the world, and some would say the best ever, chose to run on the track for 10,000. He had some aspirants and some other stuff going on. When I hooked up this interview, Troopy, we're on Zoom. So this thing I sent to you the other day, do you remember doing that article on Herald Sun?
I do.
That article?
Yep.
Yeah. So I cut it. The listeners obviously can't see that. I cut this out as a young bloke in Frankston. I cut this out. I used to cut out a couple of things of footballers and my favourite runners, just for motivation for my own training. And Troopy was always one of your faves, and it's an unbelievable article on the back page of the Herald Sun. This is a paper in Melbourne for those guys out of Victoria. And this quote, mate, I just want to say that it's got a picture of you kissing young Macy, which is a gorgeous pic. You're in an altitude chamber you used to sleep in before Beijing. You used to go and heat in the heat chambers to train in as well, the humidity chambers, but sleep in an altitude tent. And this quote from you, buddy, this is probably where you're at the time, which as an athlete I loved it, but not sure. If that means I'm going to have some form of complication from the air quality in Beijing, I'm going to have health issues that would be with me for the rest of my life, and so be it. I haven't spent 25 years of my life to bypass an Olympic Games. You're an intense unit. I love it. I loved it. I still do, and I'm stoked I found it because I've only got probably half a dozen articles that I cut out still, and I've kept that one of you. So it's ironic that we're chatting today. Tell us about that period in your life, the altitude tents, the heat chambers, just the risking it all. Like you got Macy and Freya obviously at home. So tell us about that time.
Yeah, I mean, I'd lived a great single life a lot of my career, traveling the world and going to St. Moritz and, training in Boulder, Colorado. And then, when I went to Sydney, I mean, I obviously got injured in Sydney. It was just a situation that happened, but I put so much emphasis on Athens, and Athens trained like a lunatic, wanted to be the best, and, had gone over to St. Moritz and had gone to Boulder, and, I just cooked myself. So I decided in 2008, being older, that I was going to use a lot of sports science. So I was going to use the altitude tent in my house for 3 weeks, and then I'd travel to Ballarat to use the heat chamber for 3 weeks, and I'd be back and forth. I had a young daughter and wife, and so I couldn't exactly just take off. So I wanted to look for something different. But unfortunately, it just didn't happen. I mean, I felt like a rat in a cage. I mean, there's a great line in that where, just all my life, I felt like a rat in a cage. And I just was just living this lifestyle of in bed at 9 o'clock. I would sleep 9 hours and I'd sleep at 9,000 feet. I'd do that for 3 weeks. And then I'd go to Ballarat and I'd train in this heat chamber to, replicate, 30 degrees and 95% humidity. And just, I didn't recover. And I just kept, I was doing the same things, but the difference between Athens, I trained hard, but I loved it. I didn't know I'd cooked myself until I raced, but I loved it. Going into Beijing, I was using sports science and I hated it. I'm not that type of guy. I'm an extrovert. I like to be around people. I like to have fun, and I'd isolated myself and I was just doing everything robotically. And I remember Mona telling me, after the race at Beijing, he goes, it was like I was so relieved to get on the plane to go to the race, but I'd already ran the race. And that's what happened. I blew up 17 kilometers in. I've never blown up 17 kilometers into a race in my life, and it just, I don't know. I didn't withdraw, and the 3 worst races I've got in my career are 3 Olympic Games, and it really sucks. It really sucks because that's the pinnacle. That's what you train for. That's what you live for. that's what you spend every moment wanting to have. Like, you see the moments of people crossing the finish line as a winner, and that's what you want, and for me, I just wanted a top 10. But I look at the three Olympics now, obviously much, much older. I never went in balance. Like, I had the physical attributes, but I didn't have the mental and emotional attribute. And that's where, having that person that stops you from doing too much or stop you from doing things that were too crazy, it just, again, like, you live by the sword, you die by the sword. And that was just me. And, I don't have any regrets. I mean, it is what it is. But, I know we'll go further on talking about my coaching, but I think that's what makes me a great coach. I certainly make sure that my athletes don't do what I did. And I tell them there isn't one thing that you're thinking about that I never thought about or I didn't do. And we just got to keep it simple. Like, simplicity is key. KISS, keep it simple, stupid, is the top thing to go with. So after Beijing, it was extremely demoralizing. I went on a trip. We went to the US and went to Vegas and went to Miami and went to San Francisco. And, at that point, I decided I was probably going to spend one more year and retire. I certainly felt like a failure as an athlete. And 2 marathons I hadn't done was Boston Marathon and New York Marathon. So I just decided, we went on the Beijing Wall the next day. Mona, my wife, and everyone. We talked about before, you've got to find the highest point, you make a pact. And I didn't make a pact that I wanted to make a 4th Olympics. I certainly didn't know what I wanted to do. I mean, just walking the Beijing Wall was one of the most amazing experiences. I mean, it wasn't like we went where every single person went. This is another great troopology situation. My wife had found this person that said they could take us to this remote place via van. We'd have to be picked up at a certain time. And so we got picked up in the early hours and we got driven out to this place. And like, the guy gets out of the car and he removes these plastic trees. And then we drive on this dirt road and he stops and he gets out and closes off so no one could see it from the road. And we drive up this rocky path, which says, no trespassing. And anyway, they walk us up to this remote place in the middle of nowhere. And they basically just say, you've got to walk about 5 kilometers and then there will be someone there to meet you and they will meet you down in a paddy field to take you back. And we walked like up and down where there was no one. Like, we passed no one. It was like, everyone goes to the tourist spot. So there's like thousands of people going up and down. We didn't pass anyone. You got Mongolia and China and you're just looking at the wall. And I know, at that point, I was just like, this is amazing. Like, this is different than Athens, because Athens was crazy. This was like, this had this puristic feel to it. And I didn't know if I wanted to run anymore. I knew that I was going to be heading on this trip to the US and I was going to make a decision on that trip when we went to the US, what I was going to do. And so anyway, we did all that and we flew to the US and I got to the US. And as an athlete, everyone says, take a few weeks, don't think. You don't think. You're thinking 24 hours after it, right? You're thinking in the hours after it and you just can't switch that brain off. And anyway, I decided that, 2 marathons I'd never done was Boston and New York, and I wanted to do them. And so I said to my wife at the time, why don't we move to the US for a year? I'll do Boston and I'll do New York. I don't know why New York was always the last marathon I ever wanted to do. I just, it's Frank Sinatra, the song New York, New York. It's always the closing act. And so, yeah, when we were in the States, that's when we decided that we would move to Boulder in early 2009. And I would spend a year and then I would retire at the end of 2009. And of course that didn't happen, but that was the plan.
I guess, yeah, you've done a nice little segue into part 2 of this podcast show.
Oh, is that only part 1? Shit.
I reckon that might be part 1. We'll see how we go through.
I thought we'd be up to part 4.
But the listeners like me will be enthralled with that. Like, I like to go deep and I really appreciate you going so deep. And I think running nerds will love what we're about to go into, the coaching and the methodology and that. But I think most people would love just hearing the story behind the man. And that's a really, you've gone deep, lots of hardships. And it's not all, well, everyone would gloss over it. He's a 209 man. He possibly could have been the fastest marathoner ever, one of only 5 blokes to break 2:10, all that kind of stuff. But you just went deep on everything and lots of hardships as well as an athlete. Tell us, Australia at the time, 08, 09, did you have a feeling you wouldn't come back when you got on that plane?
Oh no, I honestly thought that I would be gone for a year and I'd be back, and we were pretty much consigned to that. And I ran Boston Marathon, and Boston Marathon is just it's an amazing race. Like it had been going over 100 years. I grew up watching De Castella, and Mona ran it in '96, and I trained with Mona leading into it. And it's not just the history of the elite athletes; it's the history of the thousands and thousands and thousands of athletes that have ran it. And I don't think people really comprehend. If you look at a lot of marathons, a lot of those courses have changed over time, and they're not the original courses that they were when they first started. But Boston has stayed true. It starts in Hopkinton and it finishes on Boylston Street. It hasn't changed. And so I went out there and I got really caught in the whole euphoria of it. Like it rekindled something in me that made me just realize that, running is running, and at the end of the day, it's what motivates you. It's what fuels you. It's not what you do for other people. It's what you do for yourself. And I ran Boston Marathon and I stupidly said to my wife after it, I want to try and make a fourth Olympics. I mean, I didn't make a fourth Olympics, but it certainly set the catalyst of like, I don't want to go home. I want to make it here. I want to see if I can do it like Mona has done it, Deke's done it. I want to see if I can do it.
When you say Deke's done it, Mona's done it, top 10 and 4 Olympics.
Correct. And so that was pretty much it. But, then I got injured and then, the rest of 2009 didn't happen. I didn't run New York. I put New York off because I didn't want to do that. And then 2011, I had got myself into unbelievable shape. Like I was like ready to try and make a fourth Olympics. And I'm just trying to recall. I think so. 2009. Some reason, no, I left something out. So in 2009, I got injured, and then in 2010, I was starting to get going and get back into some training, and I decided I'd run the Sydney Running Festival. So Wayne Larden had invited me to come across, but we were due to have twins, so we thought we'd come home, have the twins, be surrounded by family support for 6 months, and I would run Sydney. Like that's what I was training for. And, I was in great shape. I thought, well, we'll just throw everything we've got at it. And unfortunately, when I flew to Australia, I ended up getting a pulmonary embolism on my lung and I ended up in hospital. And as a result of having the blood clot on my lung, I obviously couldn't run. And that sort of paid the rest of 2010. I was out. So then 2011, I started to, get myself going again, and I decided I was going to run London Marathon, and I got myself in really good shape. I ran the New York City half about 4 weeks before, and I ran 63:10. I beat Ryan Hall and, quite a few others, and I was an old fart. I think I might have been about 10th or 11th. I can't really recall, but I ran unbelievably well. And then I flew to London and I ran London Marathon, and London Marathon just didn't play out the way I would have liked. Basically we dropped the pacemakers that we were supposed to have. And then I was on my own after about 10 miles and, I was trying to go out there to run 2:10, 2:11, which was probably way too aggressive. And then considering the fact that I just run a 63-minute half marathon 4 weeks before, I cooked myself and I ended up stopping at 30K. And then, trying to work out, okay, what will I do? How am I going to try and qualify? I decided I would run Gold Coast Marathon, and anyway, that didn't happen as well. And I tried to get everything right leading into 2012, and just nothing clicked. I ran Prague, and that didn't happen. And so anyway, I ended up having numerous attempts to make the Olympic Games in 2012, and it didn't happen. But then I still kept running, after that. So, there hadn't been any talk of retirement. I turned 40. So then I went and ran the Boston Marathon, and I ended up winning the Masters that year. Ran an unbelievably great 2:17 and finished 10th. But that was the year the Boston bombings happened. And so that derailed any sense of satisfaction. We had no presentations. We had nothing. So I basically, tried to get myself up through the course of that year. I realized that I was probably at the lowest ebb of running. So I wanted to run New York at the end of 2015. And let me get this right. Sorry, I wanted to run New York at the end of 2013, and then just completely retire. But then they had Hurricane Sandy come through. And so New York weren't bringing in any elites. And so at that point, I just decided that, my running career was done. I certainly took Boston really, really hard. There were just so many hardships that come from that. And our hotel ended up being the command center for the Army and for the Sheriff's Department and the FBI and the CIA. And so we were probably privy to too many things that we should have been privy to. And I know still to this day, just still can't believe what happened. And so anyway, Hurricane Sandy came in, so I thought my career was done. And then I happened to be at the USA Track and Field Indoor Championships, which was 2015. So I'd been coaching for about 3 years at that point, and had an athlete there. And Dave Monty, who was the elite athlete coordinator, just tapped me on the shoulder and said, "Do you still want to have your last race be New York?" I was like, "Oh, hell yeah, I do. Of course I do." So that gave me motivation. I then reached out to Boston and said, "Look, I want to come back and defend my title." Sadly, I'd done no training and I only had 6 weeks to get myself right. So I went to Boston, and 2 days after Boston, I ended up having another pulmonary embolism on my lung and had another blood clot. So I got put back on thinning medication. And so by that point, I just wanted to see my career out and just survive to New York. And that's pretty much what happened. I was able to get to New York, and I just loved the whole atmosphere of New York. And I'll never forget crossing the finish line and turning back into the skyline of where all the buildings were and giving it a kiss and just thanking, not New York, but just thanking, everyone that had been involved in my career for just, being beside me and being for me and being with me. So it was pretty cool.
Literally a 20-year elite professional career comes to an end that day in New York. But you've glossed over that very quickly. We've got the coaching and the really some pretty cool stuff to come. So I won't go too deep into that, but you went through a fair bit even in your last couple of big city marathons, considering you weren't there to win. You went through a bit those last couple.
Yeah, I mean, as an athlete, I think for me, I realized how personal running was. And so this was actually me, and it was me fighting for, what I had. And, New York, I wore my Geelong singlet, which I'm unbelievably proud, to have started that club up and to, have created, the dynasty that the Geelong Region Cross Country Club has. And for me, it was important to wear that. I wanted to be proud. And when I ran my last Australian marathon, which was on the Gold Coast, I wore my Chul singlet, my club singlet, a club that I'd been with since I was about, 10 years of age. And so, they're things that I was passionate about, and realizing that when you're wearing that uniform, it's a badge of honor. It's like wearing the Australian uniform and having the coat of arms. But it all starts at that singular level, at a club level. And so, like I said, I was very fortunate to be able to see out my career, not the way that I would want it to, but the way I liked it to. So there was, some satisfaction in regards to that. But it allowed me to just, get some closure to then focus on, the next phase of my life, which was going to be coaching.
You've spoken a lot of, running meccas. We spoke about Boston being the absolute pinnacle in the marathon. I agree. Ballarat, you spoke about as a running mecca here in Victoria. Tell us about Boulder. Boulder's a pretty special place for those out of Colorado who don't know. Like, I love the history of Boulder running and those kind of things, and the University of Colorado and all that stuff. Tell us about Boulder and go from there, and how you started Boulder Track Club and all these kinds of things, because it's a really special story. And I reckon this is gonna enthrall a lot of people, because the Boulder Track Club now is you've done so well, buddy. So take us through that.
Oh, well, I'm not associated with the Boulder Track Club anymore, but that's another story. But yeah, like I came over here because De Castella. Like De Castella was extremely, parochial about me at the time. I'd been traveling to London and back, and I was getting a bit stale. And he had recommended that I come to Boulder, so I came out to Boulder in 2002. I was planning to come out here in 2001, but that was when I was going to do Chicago, and I did my calf. So I came out here for 3 weeks, and I ponied up with a guy called Andrew Leatherby, who was a bronze medalist at the Commonwealth Games that year, and then I came back in 2003. And so Boulder is one of these, just, it is a utopia. Like, it's just like, it's a running mecca. But when you're driving down Highway 36, and you see the Flatirons in the background, like, it's something out of the Truman Show. It just doesn't seem real. And, we've got the very best cyclists, triathletes, runners, rock climbers, like, for a population of 100,000, like, this is an unbelievable place to live. And, when I wanted to come here for a year, like, this is just where I wanted to be. I loved it. And, I was still competing. I set up to 2014, but I was trying to make an Olympics up to 2012. But I started coaching in 2010. And I pretty much applied the same rule that Mona had applied to me. And that is, I train twice a day, every day. And these are the times, and you'll get 3 strikes and you're out. And I know, just people wanted to train with me and wanted me to coach them. And it just was a very simplistic process. And so I decided that, okay, well, if we're going to do this, like, let's start up a club. And I just went with the same way that I started the Geelong Region Cross Country Club. I started the Boulder Track Club, and, it was extremely organic the way it was built. And, I had a lot of people telling me, look, you're not going to survive here, because most of the clubs that are here are charging like $200-$300 for coaching, and it's very elite. And here I am offering $50 a month for coaching, and you can be a member, and we do social activities. And I just wanted to create a club that had kids and youth and, recreational runners and elite runners, because that's the club system that we have in Australia. But here in Boulder, it's like you're either elite or you're part of a club system. The two don't interact. And the club system, they're quite intimidated by the elite, and with the elite, and it's probably more sub-elite than elite, but they're quite elitist, and they don't, they want to be put on a pedestal, and they do it for ego reasons. So I found it just quite dysfunctional. So I went about it, and it started out pretty basic, and we grew it up to over a couple of hundred members. And, I had some great athletes at the time. I had Jason Hartman, who'd run 210 at Chicago, and, Laura Thweet, who was the 225 runner at London and had won USA cross country champs in 2015. Sean Quigley, who'd made Pan Am and Chiba, and had been second at Club Cross, had won the USA BIX 7-mile championships. John Gray, who unfortunately passed away a couple of years ago, who had been second at Club Cross, and a few titles. And then obviously we've, had this strange transition where, I've got Jake Riley, who just was second at the US Olympic trials, but was wearing a Boulder Track Club uniform. But, I hadn't been part of the club since John Gray passed away. The way I'd set the club up was to my detriment. It was like, come in, do everything right, then appoint a board, have the board run the club, and then I would slowly just move my way out, but have the club sustainable. What I didn't realize is that a lot of people have hidden agendas and have egos. And so when they move into those positions, they want to undo everything that's been done, and they want to eradicate whatever someone's done. Whereas I'm about, when you come into that position, build on it. Like, Rome wasn't built in a day. It took a lot of time for it to build on, but Rome fell in a day. And so the BTC for me all fell in a day, particularly when, unfortunately, John had passed away. I needed a bit of time out to try and gather my thoughts, but then a few people in the club saw that as an opportunity to have me removed. But I just sort of bit my tongue for a while. And when we went into the trials, my athletes were wanting to wear Team Boulder, which is the club that I have and the business that I have. And I really didn't want to create any ripples. And, when I started Boulder Track Club, my whole mission and my whole dream was to have one day a US Olympian. And we achieved that. So even though I'm not part of the club, the Boulder Track Club got their first US Olympian. And so for me, it was like a closing of the chapter to then move into the next phase of what I have now. But, there's no regrets. It's my fault. I didn't protect myself as well as what I should have. And I obviously wasn't expecting someone to unfortunately take their life. But just through that whole coaching merry-go-round, it all started out great, and a lot of people joined the team, and I started having success with elite athletes. So then more people wanted to join, and I had a problem of not being able to say no. So the club just kept growing and growing, and with more people, you have more dynamics, you have more challenges. A lot of people think the grass is greener on the other side, and then before you knew it, it just all exploded. And here I am. Wasn't left with a lot, but I just took what I had and what I knew and started something new and something great. And I'm really excited about the young kids that I have, and I'm more importantly excited about what I've learned and what I know and what I want to do as I move forward with this new team.
Yeah, you're right. Look, you're a great person, and unfortunately, sometimes, mate, that can be a sitting duck for people that haven't got the best of intentions. But that's just life, and we move on and we grow from that. You've had some great athletes. I love the way, like the club system in Australia, that you bring the sub elites, the club runners, beginners, all in one. And we'll talk about what you're doing right now in a minute. But let's just spend a few minutes on your methodology. I love so many stuff, the way you go about it, the minimal analysing, the minimal data. You take data when you need it, but you really keep your athletes so well grounded. Tell us about a few of your staples. Like, we know how much Troopy loves hills. We know the 3-hour run, I think 5 or 6 weeks out. Go into that kind of stuff. The progression runs, which you love, the tempos, the fartleks. Spend 3 or 4 minutes on the training, I guess, the really meat and potatoes of it all for someone like a Jake Riley. So for the listeners, Jake qualified for the 2020 games, which obviously aren't going ahead in 21 in Atlanta, came second to only Galen Rupp beat him. So this is Troopy, one of Troopy's finest, I guess, coaching moments. Take us through Riley's last few months, mate.
Look, the training is just it's just straight bread and butter. It's we have a long run every Sunday, a medium run Wednesday. We do workouts on Tuesday, Friday. Whatever the training workout is really irrelevant. Whether it's doing the progressive runs or doing the hills or doing the fartleks. I incorporate monofartlek. I incorporate deep quarters. I incorporate a sort of a reflective Benson's Hill session that we did in Ballarat. But honestly, the key to coaching is the personalization, being able to embed yourself in the emotional and mental. Athletes today are too caught up on data. It's on Strava's. Obviously, the internet's an amazing place to look at everything. And what people see are the weeks of the best training an athlete's done. And everyone thinks that that's what they've got to do. Like, I want to see the worst training. I want to see where people, plateaued. I want to see where they were in that trough and they couldn't come out, because they're the things that are really pinnacle. Like, no athlete can hold themselves up for 52 weeks of the year, 365 days. It's the other training. Like, it's the very basic training that you do week in, week out, month in, month out that leads to success. And, I said, during that time that I moved to Ballarat, obviously in 95, I had to try and, reorganize myself after the accident. But then 96, 97, 98, and then leading into 99, it was just all consistent stuff. I just did what Mona did. And that wasn't my training. It was Mona's training that was given to him from Chris Wardlaw. And yet I never spoke a word to Chris Wardlaw. I just did what Mona did. It was so simplistic. Moving to the States, that simplicity is not there. It's everything is data. It's looking at, previous training cycles. It's comparing to what other athletes are doing. Whatever seems to be the hottest training group in the country at the moment is what everyone wants to replicate. And I've just done my own thing. Like, I just talked about a series of athletes that I'm no longer involved with, but I've had success with them. Like, I had great success with Laura Thweet. She won, 3 club cross country champs, a US cross country champs. She ran 2:28 on debut at New York. She ran 2:25 at London. Sean Quigley ran 27:50 for 10,000 meters. John Gray, Jason Hartman. Like, even though I don't coach them, the training hasn't changed too much. But and not even my philosophy, but I think just the way I approach them as human beings has changed. I come from a system that, like in Australia, it's just like, man up, all right, you're having a bad run, go and have a beer. If you're going to have a cry about it, go home. Like, just, whereas in today's day and age, and particularly learning what I learned after John and, obviously the unfortunate circumstances around his death, like, I've had to change and adapt. And so, the success that I've had with Jake and, even with some of my other athletes, on that same day that Jake qualified for the US Olympic team, I had a girl in Canada running the NACAC cross country championships who finished second. She'd had a tough last 2 years of college, come out of that injured, took a year out, and then just started running with me. And I just tried to implement simplicity with her. And all of a sudden she's running better than she ever has. So, coaching, it's not necessarily the training. I look at guys like Sean Williams, who's had success, and, there's Nick Beddoe, who's had success, Chris Wardlaw. Like, we've got many good coaches in Australia, and their training sessions are different. Their philosophies are similar. They're not the same, but it's the way they approach their athletes. And the key is not trying to smack a square peg in a round hole. And what I mean by that is that a lot of athletes will come to me thinking that I'm their coach for them, but I'm not. We might not have the right personality that clicks. They might not have the training ethic that is required to do what I do. And they see the grass being greener on the other side. So it's just a simple thing. Well, if you coach me, you can make me a better athlete. But there's just so much more to the makeup of that individual that determines whether they're going to be successful. And a lot of athletes join groups and coaches that they expect the coach to change to mirror what they need. The reality is that's just not the right coach. There is the right coach out there for you, and you need to find them, but you need to find the coach that aligns to what you need and what you have for it to work. And I've just been lucky that the success that I've had has been purely because of that symbiotic relationship that we've been able to make it work, not from a training perspective, but from everything outside of training. So the mental, the emotional, the philosophical, all those things just add in, and then it just builds a pillar of trust. And then with them, they just know that it's just good, honest work that they need to be patient with, and it'll come over time.
Tune in next week for part 3, the final episode of the deep dive with Lee Troop.